So obviously from my statement, it's clear that the data that the new determinations have slowed significantly. What steps are you taking to improve the pace at which these new chemical determinations are issued?
Appreciate the question, and it's certainly true that our new chemical reviews have been slow for more than 5 years, and we have just about the same number of chemicals that are waiting for EPA approval than has historically been the case over the past several years. I will note we also have 15% of a smaller staff because 15% of the new chemicals risk assessors were permanently moved into the existing chemicals risk evaluation division towards the end of the last administration. So from day one, we actually had less than what both the Obama administration and the Trump administration had for new chemical reviews. That said, I completely agree that EPA has responsibilities. It's not just about asking Congress for money and continuing to do things the same way. And I 100% agree with you. So there's a number of things that we've done already. One is the biofuels initiative that we rolled out a couple of months ago, where we streamlined the review of those types of chemistries because we had several dozen different biofuels applications in front of the agency. And we realized that by creating a dedicated team where the same people were always reviewing that type of chemistry, and by streamlining the review of those chemicals, we could get more of them out the door more quickly than if we treated every one like its own new thing over and over again. And we'll be expanding that type of initiative into other sectors in the coming weeks and months. We're just trying to sort of narrow our focus there. I think one thing that we've noticed over the years is that companies often don't give us everything we need to do a risk assessment that they feel reflects the real world conditions.
Okay, so let me stop you right there because isn't that on everybody's plate there? Why are they not giving you what you want? Are you telling them what you want in a timely manner so you can hit these deadlines?
So I think we're realizing that's part of the problem. The problem is us. I think that so we did an analysis of why we have to rework so many risk assessments. And it turns out that, what happens is sometimes after a couple of months, a company will come and say, oh, no, I'm not planning on releasing this to water, or, oh, I'm not making it this way, your risk assessment's wrong. And we'll say, okay, give us the data, but then we kind of have to start over again from scratch and redo the risk assessment. And that causes delays, not just for that company, but for all the companies waiting behind.
Right.
So what we're about to do is release the results of that analysis that kind of just, that lists and documents the type of information that will help us if we get it on day one. And we're going to do some pretty aggressive and proactive outreach to companies to make sure that they understand what our data needs are. And we're really hoping that that helps us work more quickly as well.
Well, I do know that you've had a lot of outreach to companies and that there's a very open door there. So that's very much appreciated by everybody. So if you have a 15% smaller staff over the last year and a half, have you hired into those positions?
So the 2022 Appropriations Act gave us a modest number of new hires. I will say...
But can you not fill in the 15%?
We've only had that money for a couple of months because I think our spend plan was only approved a couple months ago. So we're doing an aggressive recruitment strategy. We have either hired or selected or somewhere in the process about 3/4 of the people that the 22 appropriations law lets us hire. And I want to say to you, because it's true, rebuilding the new chemical staff is my #1 personnel priority, and there's not even a close second.
What kind of, well, let me skip to the, this is kind of my own personal bugaboo, and I think it's the work from home scenario. So EPA's YouTube channel on April 22nd had a YouTube that said EPA Future of Work, Tips and Tricks, and I've talked to the EPA administrator about this, returning to work. And you said in that, I'm so looking forward to meeting as many of you as I can. What does that mean? Have you not met them?
I hadn't met them in person.
Are they back now?
Many of them are back. Many of them are teleworking more than they did before. Some have applied to be permanently remote work. And I have to say, I think the entire country is reimagining the way its workforce is designed following COVID. I think the West Virginia State Legislature just wrote a report that sounds much like what EPA's experienced. And I think what they said was that telework has proven to be beneficial and productive as a routine part of conducting the business of the state. And it is beneficial. But
Yeah,
that said,
I'm not disputing telework, but if I had an organization that was falling way behind, I think I might be roping people back to the office and saying, look, it's not working this way. And I understand it's a capacity thing, and I'm not here to beat up on you. I want to help. I want to help the situation, move it quicker, like you do. But I did find that, when you have that lack of connection, there's also a lot of stories out there. The lack of connection in work, or people doing other things at certain times of the day when you're principally engaged is a problem. But you're right, that's a bigger problem than what's going on in your office.
But I agree with you. It's been great to meet my staff in person. There are intangible benefits associated with in-person meetings and just sort of walking down the hallway and seeing people. I've really enjoyed it.
I mean, I think, let me ask about PFAS really quickly, because I know you know a lot about this. There are several definitions, I guess, at EPA on PFAS. Do you think a clear and consistent definition would be useful for the EPA?
Thanks for that question. I do think so. So the definition that EPA used in its rule that Congress actually is requiring us to do to collect historic information about the way PFAS is made and used, that definition was first written by my office in 2006 for purposes of the TSCA New Chemicals Program. And we then proposed to use that definition in that rule, and after we proposed it, the OECD, an international organization, proposed a much broader definition. So we're now kind of looking at the public comments that we got on that rule, and we're looking to see, what a more robust definition might look like, and whether we should be adding additional PFAS to our original proposal for that rule.
I mean, I think uniformity obviously is easier, and if you're having issues with meeting deadlines and having clear roadmaps are always much more beneficial. But apparently, Rodica Fox, when she testified before the committee, said that EPA was not going to be developing a uniform definition. So I've go over my time, and I see we have some other members here, so I'll stop here, and maybe we can get back to this.
I wouldn't.
Go ahead.
Get 30 seconds here.
Sure.
So I think what OECD said was they created a really broad definition for PFAS, and then said that individual regulators might do different things. And so, for example, a definition that would work for the water office would properly be focused on PFAS that would be expected to be in water, whereas a definition that worked for the TSCA office might be one for PFAS that are expected to be manufactured and processed. So I do think there'll be some differences, but I think it's important to think about what we all mean when we say that something is or is not a PFAS.
I just wanted to clarify, I think you addressed this when you talked about the how you're going to handle the PFAS issue. But I was wondering, do you intend to utilize a tiered approach? I think you said you would, to classifying PFAS by categorizing and prioritizing them based on different physical properties and hazards. Is that your intention?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And I think that some of the confusion that we hear today is your office's role with PFAS as opposed to the health advisory that came out from the water office. And this, to me, is having had PFAS in our water systems and shut down our local water systems overnight, the risk assessments and the risk communications are so extremely important. And so I am concerned that when you have one office from the EPA setting an advisory level, what does advisory mean to people? It means that if you're in that area, that it's unsafe, and they're planning to come out with a safe drinking level water, which is going to be higher than the advisory level. So, I mean, I know this is not your problem, but it is your problem because it is a chemical. And I don't know, how do you message that to people when you're trying to tell them what's safe and what isn't?
I think I mean, I think you're absolutely right that risk communication is important. And as a science-based agency, we often speak scientifically and don't do as much work as we should, speaking for my part of the agency, at sort of translating into words that people can really understand and access. I think, though, on the drinking water side, it's not that different from the lead rules, right? Because the maximum contaminant level goal for lead is 0, because it's generally accepted that there's no safe level of lead. The rules do factor in detection limits and treatment techniques and other things that present realistic, or represent barriers to actually getting to 0. And I feel like the agency managed that risk communication well, and I have confidence that the agency can also succeed in the PFAS space.
Okay, I'm concerned because obviously what Senator Kelly was getting to is on the health advisory level, we can't measure that low, and so how do you know? You don't. Yeah. Let me ask you about the PPE, because I mentioned it in my statement with OSHA. And I think there's some concern that you're drifting into OSHA regulations where making assumptions that people aren't wearing PPE, so a chemical may not be safe in a water, but if they're fully gowned up and have protective equipment, it's safe to be in and around. How do you... why are you making assumptions that workers are not wearing their PPE? Is that and isn't that OSHA's job rather than yours? And we've already discussed that your deadlines are last, so let's stay in our lane, I guess, is my message.
I appreciate the question. So first of all, the law tells us to look at potentially exposed and susceptible subpopulations, and that clearly has to include workers. And while we're in extremely close contact with OSHA and NIOSH and are coordinating with them really well, we can't just assume that OSHA will work for everyone. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that OSHA rules don't apply to everybody. They don't apply to self-employed workers, and they don't apply to public sector workers who live in a state that doesn't have an OSHA-approved plan. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is when you actually go on OSHA's website for the chemical-specific standards that they write, the very first sentence of that website says that they're outdated and inadequate for protecting worker health because they were written in the 1970s. And the last reason is, when you look at OSHA's top 10 most frequent safety violations, which a list that they put out every single year you see respirator, eye, and skin protection safety standards as among those top 10 most frequent violations. So we can't just assume that OSHA is enough, and we can't just assume that OSHA is used and followed by everybody. But this is where that risk communication point you just made is so important, because we know that a lot of companies, especially the larger manufacturers, go beyond what OSHA requires them to do when they're looking out for their workers, and we know that. And I think it's incumbent on the agency to make sure to communicate that when we write our risk evaluations so that people aren't unduly afraid of an absence of a safety measure that is actually there at their facility where they work. So that's something that we do plan to do. And as we move towards risk management, I think what we're striving for is consistency with OSHA rules when OSHA rules are enough, consistency with best industry practices when best industry practices are enough, and to basically level the playing field and make sure that everyone is protected no matter who they work for or where they live.
I mean, I think the goal of that, obviously, is what TSCA is about. Mm-hmm. But we have other agencies. I mean, my concern is to get to your core functions and to meet those obligations that are outlined very specifically in the law, and that you have additional, whether it's OSHA or somebody else, clean water, clean air, whatever. Entities that are tangential to TSCA, important. I just am concerned about as the mission creep, or if you take on too much, you're not going to get anything done. And so I just put that on your table, and I appreciate everything. You've been very candid in your answers, and I appreciate your service. You're doing a good job. Thank you.